Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday, August the 22nd today. We did have some progress on the cereal harvest earlier this week and some swathing on canola, but that's come to a halt for right now. Something that we've noticed over the last couple of weeks as we've watched corn ears develop is that overall we're seeing quite a few fields where there's some tip back. So that means that the plants figured that there wasn't enough available moisture to fill starch into all of the kernels. And as a result, there's been some kernel abortion starting at the tips and slowly working their way down. On the upside, we've had some moisture. On the downside, it might have been a bit too much and a bit too fast in some areas. But on the overnight between Wednesday and Thursday morning, our area received anywhere from 2 to 4 inches of precipitation. So that means that we basically have enough for the rest of the season to fill out all of those late season crops. And we really don't need a lot of rain from here on out. Another thing that we've noticed is that in some fields, the ears are quite a bit longer than they are on average. And as a result, they're actually poking out the end of some of those husk covers. And basically what that does as these fill with starch is that they're a great invitation for blackbirds. So we're probably going to see a little more blackbird damage this year, so they'll actually land on those ears and just chip away at the husks and empty out the starch from those kernels. So that can result in a bit of yield loss as well. Obviously, the last thing to note here is that there was some hail. So between the New Bothwell and just south of Kleefeld areas, there was some hail in that storm midweek. And as a result, we're seeing a lot of leaf damage here. Anything that stays green is still going to be contributing to the health of this plant and to help fill that starch from here on out. So the other thing that we see with hail is that there can be some damage to the actual kernels themselves. So the biggest damage would be between that blister stage and dough stage. And we're nearing the end of that in this field. So it does take about a week to 10 days to really see that bruising on those ears to get a good understanding of how much of those kernels are actually damaged. So we'll probably take a look at this field again next week. In a field like this, we are just seeing the first of the kernels starting to dent, so we're at that later R4 stage, and that means that we should have another 5 weeks before physiological maturity. In a field like this, with all of the damage that we're seeing, it's going to slow it down a little bit, so we're guessing about 6 weeks between now and physiological maturity in this field, so that's basically how long we need before we should be able to have a frost without any damage to a corn stand like this. August rains are critical to setting soybean yields, and soybeans really are the one crop that's been on the biggest roller coaster ride so far this year. We started out with very hot, dry conditions shortly after planting, and in many fields had some issues getting consistent stands out of the ground. However, for the most part, things turned around by mid-season, and over the last 4 weeks with all of the rain that we've had, we're finding some really tall, lush soybean stands. With that moisture helping to build that seed size, we're finding that some of these canopies are getting a little bit top heavy, and with the heavy winds that we had this week, we're finding that there's a lot of fields that have a bit of a lean to them, and in some cases, some lodging as well. Lodging isn't good, especially if there's a lot of moisture in that canopy, and it doesn't matter which oilseed we're growing. It could be sunflowers, canola, or soybeans. They are all susceptible to white mold or sclerotinia. So we're seeing even in this field that there are some patches where the tops of the plants are starting to brown a little bit and some of that seed is being aborted. And that's a result of a sclerotinia infection that happened during the flowering period. Again, between R1 and R2, when fungicide applications would have been helpful, things look quite dry out there, so not a lot of fungicide was applied. However, we are seeing that white mold is starting to be a yield limiting factor in quite a few fields. Again, nothing we can do about it at this point. However, we should keep it in mind when it comes to planning our rotation for next year. We shouldn't plant another susceptible crop in a field where we've seen a lot of sclerotinia. The last thing to touch on this week is just some dicamba damage that we're still seeing late in the season in some of our soybean stands. So again, those plants are still going to be a little bit stunted and those leaves aren't unfurling quite right. We are expecting to have a bit of a drag in terms of maturity on them, but one thing that we're not seeing is lodging in those fields. So who knows, maybe by the time we take the weigh wagon out there, we won't see any effects from that dicamba drift at all. But again, we'll keep you posted. At this point, we really just want that sun to come out again and stay, as well as some gentle winds to dry out those canopies as much as possible and let us get on with harvest again. If you have any questions about your crop or would like us to come take a look at them with you, please don't hesitate to give us a call. And again, thanks for watching the videos and have a safe and enjoyable weekend.